Hi, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Linda Refvik, and I'm the CEO for the Norwegian Fashion and Textile Agenda, the cluster of the Norwegian fashion and textile industry. The cluster's core business is to develop measures that strengthen sustainable value creation for the cluster's members and for the industry as a whole. Tekstilaksjonen is one of our most important consortia. In the midst of the paradigm shift, the industry is rapidly being driven by digitalization and green transformation. This creates opportunity to change the organization of the industry toward circularity. The COVID-19 situation has hit the companies hard. According to McKinsey's recent survey, a global reduction in turnover of 30% is expected in 2020. Virke confirms the same decline in the Norwegian market and highlights an increase in e-commerce of 27%. Despite a problematic background, this crisis has opened for more innovation, and we see that the Norwegian companies are optimistic about the future. To discuss this topic of circularity further, I'm so grateful and proud to welcome to this webinar Circularity Rising. And to lead this webinar, I have the pleasure to introduce Tom Savigard from Avansera AS. Tom has been a partner of the Future Laboratory for many years, consulting for the world's most famous companies to make a better future happen, and is a special friend of ours. So Tom, the stage is yours.
And the fashion industry in particular has certainly had a spotlight on how it does what it does. Everything from equality and diversity and inclusion through to climate change and sustainability. So I think that this is the year to have this conversation. By no means is it a new conversation, because we're all used to this, the linear fashion cycle, take, make, use and waste. And a lot of us have started to adopt this, where we start to reuse and repair the waste or what is being used. We return it and we recycle it and we make again from that system. So as a model, I think this is something that we all understand. I hope we do. This isn't the aim of the conversation today. The aim of the conversation is to say that we all acknowledge the challenge. The industry is responsible for 4% of GHG emissions, which is the same as France, UK and Germany combined as countries. And yet, if we're going to try and meet this target of 1.5 degree pathway, which has been set by the Paris Agreement, we have to halve the amount of emissions that we're producing today within 10 years. So it's a very, very big ambition, and it's not going to happen with business as usual. This year hasn't helped. While the consumer, as we'll see, and the government have said it's time for change, a lot of businesses have obviously been concerned about cash. As Linda said, they've been concerned about health and hygiene with regards to, using recycled product and materials, and also the higher cost of sustainable materials. And for example, Ralph Lauren has 160 million worth of inventory that hasn't been sold. So the idea of wastage and extra stock has become a reality for retailers. But there is an opportunity as the government talk about green deals and green bonds and funds and loans that come with terms and conditions for a climate change a utopia. You also have some brands like Patagonia, who are getting very political with regards to the election. So there's a lot of conversations around it's time for change from national authorities. As well, you have investors. So investors are excited about sustainability. It's about time. This has been coming for a long time, because they now classify sustainable or impact investing as a risk category. So actually, if they start using the word risk management, then things start to really change. So European investors are pouring more than twice as much cash into sustainable funds year on year. And BlackRock here, who has a circularity economy fund, has seen that fund in particular grow by 4,500% 12 months. So an incredible shift within the investment world. We also have leaders within our industry. Last week at CFS Plus, while it was a bit of an ego festival, it was definitely a chance to see the leaders of this industry start to say, we know what, this is the top priority for us, especially when it comes to sustainable sourcing. And then when it comes to something like the importance of how we start to really think about cost, you know, for the financial moment within our business models, the accelerated reduction of GHG emissions will generate savings. So, for example, if we were to embrace digitization and produce things within Norway based on nearshore technology, it would save £600 per tonne of GHG emissions reduced. So if you think about the millions of tonnes that we have to save, that's a lot of money that we could start to save as well. And then also, for example, reducing e-commerce returns through better analytics of customer purchasing. And there's one company in Sweden called Atakak who is trialing how do we start to create something using digital technologies that can also be produced on demand. And the consumer has a big part to play in this. As you can see here, the percentages are all above 50%. So we have consumers paying more attention, or think that more attention should be paid to reducing pollution as we move from left to right. So we also have the fact that 60% here are saying that they're going out of their way to recycle and purchase products in environmentally friendly packaging. The use of sustainable materials is an important purchasing factor. A brand's promotion of sustainability is an important factor. 70% here, the fifth column along, say they are supportive of fashion brands delaying the launch of new collections as a result of COVID-19. 60% say that they cite newness as one of the biggest, as the least, important attribute when making purchases. And 70% say they are planning to purchase more durable fashion items and keep the items they already have for longer. So the consumer, or the European specifically, is really starting to get behind this. So we have governments demanding circularity. We have investors preferring circularity. We have CEOs and importantly CFOs valuing circularity. And we have consumers wanting it and saying, actually, this is the reason. So the big question we have is, where do we start? Where are the intervention points? Now, some of you might know this, but 80% of the solutions are upstream. There are responsibilities as an industry, as producers and retailers, and 20% of it is downstream. So when a consumer has their hands on the product, hopefully more than once, what do they do with that product? How do they care for it? And hopefully, how do they return it back to us? So this is going to be the focus for our conversation today, is how can producers and retailers propel the industry towards circularity? So the first question that we're going to talk about is, how can you analyze your emission reduction hotspots? How can we use technology to allow us to get better at focusing on key solutions to decarbonize our value chain? We're going to talk a little bit about how we can drive sustainable decision making into the design process, so that as designers, we are sitting here thinking, well, this product, we like it, but it's going to cost waste. It's going to cause waste and it's going to cost us. And actually, it's really undeconstructible. So we have to start thinking differently as designers. And we have here Zalando with Redesign for Circularity, and how they're a capsule collection, a start, but a capsule collection to start to make sure that it can come back into the system again. OK, so switching to a service model. So this is Nike with Nike Adventure Club. So Nike Adventure Club was launched last year. It came out of Nike Valiant, which is their incubation innovation team. And this is very much D2C. So this is Nike taking ownership of the entire value chain. So producing trainers and making sure that the use of the trainers goes back into their system. So this is for teenagers. So you subscribe to Nike Adventure Club. You have a different tariff or a different rate based on how regularly you get new shoes. And what they did is, in a strategy that they looked at design. So you get fresh trainers, new product, new colors, etc. You also get this sense of desire because you're comes with your name on it, and you get lots of interesting gifts and things to do. It's convenient because Nike take the product back and they use their Nike grind company to grind the product back and recycle it. But it's also sustainable because it's teaching consumers sustainability through price. So this idea of a convenient model that is starting to see Nike become a vertically integrated sustainability system. But their biggest competitor, Adidas here, again, coming out with something which I think is very interesting. Now, in terms of creating, how might we create or generate more desire for durable, high quality recyclable products? So with Futurecraft.loop, and I'll let Connor talk a lot about that because he was involved in it. But what I love about this specifically is how the product itself gives a feedback to the company. So the promise is, please run in these shoes, but we want your product back. So we can actually use the data and the information about how the product was used to learn to iterate better products in the future. And at the same time, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can educate consumers to adopt more sustainable usage and end of use behaviors. So for example, Selfridges. Now, Selfridges have been creating something for a couple of years with regards to their fashion retail conversation around sustainability, but they launched it this year. And from the inside conversations is they fast tracked it this year. So this is about them beginning with repair shops and resale shops and vintage shops, but in the next 5 years, really starting to change the terms and conditions so that every single brand that's in their store is sustainable. Now that becomes a very different conversation about teaching the consumer and creating almost like a temple for sustainability. And then when it comes from taking waste from your company to be used again, H&M here piloting within Stockholm and rolling out hopefully, and Sarah will talk a bit about this from her experience of being involved in the concept, whereby again allowing the consumer to see product being reknitted based on waste product live in the shop, but just the way in which that smart use of materials. And in each of the slides here, you can see how the circularity model is being used in different ways. Okay, so don't worry, this presentation will be distributed afterwards so that you can all read it at your leisure, and obviously, hopefully it's prompting many questions. So what I'd like to do now is to now properly introduce Connor and Sarah, if you'd like to turn your cameras on. There we are. So thank you so much. So hopefully I haven't challenged you too much and I haven't confused you, because you apparently are both very, very expert in this space, right? So Connor, tell everyone a bit about yourself.
Hi there, everyone, and thanks for the invitation today. Great kickoff, Tom. So I've been working in sustainability and circular economy for around 10 years, starting with Marks and Spencer's, then Adidas, so you touched on that for a little bit, and then more recently John Lewis. And then even more recently than that, started my own consultancy. I really feel that there's so many brands right now, particularly because of COVID, they want to start in this circular space, but they don't really know where to start or how to start. So I'm helping them to navigate that space, see how massive the opportunity is, and really start that roadmap. So that's the space I'm in. And yeah, there's a lot of work we can all get after for sure.
Okay. And hello, Sarah.
Hi, Tom.
Tell us a bit about you.
Yes, so really happy to be here as well. Thank you, Linda and Tom, for having both me and Connor for this discussion. So I work at the Global Sustainability Department for the H&M Group. So that means that I have the privilege to work with all of our brands. So going from COS, Monkey, Stories, Arket, and of Weekday, and of course H&M brand. It can mean both working on a strategic level. We're looking into how might a possible ambition look for a group like ours within circularity, but it could also connect to things that are much more hands-on, so supporting brands and function that are piloting things as we speak. And I have more of a designer background, so also I'm coming really from trend forecasting, product development, and working my way into sustainability. That seems like the core of our business at the moment and going forward. So really happy to be here and talk with you about this today.
Super. Okay. Because I know that when we spoke originally, we the three of us had a conversation, and there were clearly different parts of this system that we're talking about. It's not I think it's very easy to say circularity and people kind of understand it, but I think it is more complex. So I guess my question for you is, have I just sold circularity to you? Do you feel like you're thinking, thank God you're in a job that does this? Like, is this now the moment for circular experts?
I mean, I think it's a really exciting time. I mean, like you say, there is expectations from the customer. There is an interest from investment side. There is, I think, also an expectation on CEOs and the coming CEOs of this business to have knowledge and ideas within the area. So really exciting to work, but that's also, I think, still the beginning of the journey. We can still see that we want to take science-based decisions, but we still lack data, for example, on some of the touching points throughout the things that we want to do. So I think it's great that we see this momentum, but there's still a lot to do. And I think, like you say, I mean, it's such a big umbrella, and the definition could also be different from if you ask me, only me, Connor, and you. Maybe we would explain it in different ways. And I mean, like within the H&M Group, we try to get a circular approach throughout the value chain, where I focus then mostly on the use and the reuse phase. So when you say like the downstream side, when the product is at the customer, what can we actually then do to make sure that the products are for use for a longer time? But I guess Connor might have a different approach to it.
Yeah, I mean, your question, like, where are we now? You're right. I think we're in a fantastic wave going forward now. Circularity was a really hard sell 4 years ago. Now these teams are really getting in the boardroom. It's almost the opposite way around as well. CEOs are saying like, okay, wow, like we need to be doing these things. The amount of pilots which are launching at the moment is phenomenal. And I know there's so many more that are going to be launching in 2021. So businesses are now seeing that the proof of concept is there, and they're like, we need to get going because the consumer wants it. There's legislation coming, and our competitors are already doing pilots, so we got to catch up. So I think your question around circularity, what is it and what does it mean? I think it means different things to different brands. And that's not to say there is a holy grail for circularity, but the way that Patagonia do circularity isn't the right fit for necessarily the way that Adidas will do it. So there's a different product category. There's a different way that consumer uses the product. There's a different market it's being sold in. There's a different demographic buying it. So I think there's going to be different entry points for different brands, and that will be up to them to think, what's the unique way for them to start in this space and build from there. It's very difficult for a brand to go from zero to fully circular straight away. It's all about testing and learning. So I think I agree with Sarah. There's a lot of noise at the moment. There's a lot of piloting. But we're still at the very, very, very baby steps of just touching the surface.
So from what I'm hearing, and also I think looking at the slides and looking at the market, as you say, it feels like the easiest starting point is the consumer. It's in retail. It's those moments where you can see something happening behind a glass screen. It's a shoe that you send back, and it feels like it's a baby step forward for the consumer to feel, okay, I kind of feel involved. Do you feel that, because I talked about the consumer having a role to play, do you think this is, I guess, what are your thoughts on what next in terms of creating this sort of desire to choose differently and to shop differently? Do you think that's a brand's responsibility and about educating the consumer? Is that what we're seeing to begin with, maybe?
Yeah. Okay. I
think from here, brands have a huge responsibility. It's cheap to make stuff. It's expensive to clean up stuff. So that's where we've been. That's how we've got to where we are. You make it and you sell it. You make your profit and job done. That cost to clean up, there is no such thing as a way. It just moves somewhere else. And that producer has never had to pay for that so far. So I think brands do have a responsibility to think about that next phase, whether that be new service models, repair models, whatever that could be. But I also think government's got a huge role to play. So we see like the extended producer responsibility on electrical products, things that have batteries in them. this needs to come into the fashion space in essentially all categories, focusing firstly where products are difficult to recycle. And by adding that sort of tax to these types of products, it will get into the brand's mindset of, okay, if we make a product that is recyclable or lasts a very, very long time, maybe they get a lower tax. And the opposite, you get higher tax. And that tax is then used to fund collection programs, education, and recycling programs. So I think it's brands, and I also think it's government in this space.
Yeah, I would agree with Connor here. And I think going back to like, is the customer's responsibility? I would rather say, I mean, I think the customer is key to the solution, but the responsibility, I would say, still relies within the companies. And I think a little bit like what you were showing also, I mean, when we have a look at our value chain and where do we actually have the highest and the biggest chunk of the emission coming from, and really, I mean, painting that picture and creating the awareness within the organization about that. And then I think you can start to tackle those pillars, so to say, from different angles, whether it's within the production phase where we know that we have the majority of the emissions, but then also the user phase where I feel that we haven't had any set ambitions so far what to do. I mean, we have concrete goals when it comes to input, so the materials that we want to use in 2030 and the emissions that we no longer want to have in 2040, but we haven't have any hard goals when it comes to the use and the reuse phase. So I think it's also, I mean, customer will be key within the use, but I think it's up to us to offer something that is convenient enough, attractive enough, affordable enough, exciting enough. I mean, to make them go for that option. So. Okay. Key to solution, but responsibility at the company, and also legislations, like Connor mentioned.
So as two people, and I think there's probably a lot of us on the Zoom call, the Teams call, that are going, yeah, I agree, and then that makes sense. It's logical. We have to be responsible. The consumer is a player within this, and we need to help them, incentivize them, motivate them, make it desirable, convenient. But in reality, like when you're working internally, either consulting Connor or within H&M Group, and you're going, Sarah, and you're going, okay, well, you're all nodding. So why aren't we moving faster? Like, what are some of the barriers that you find professionally that are maybe seen as negatives, but are maybe opportunities for everyone listening to say, you might understand these things too, but what are some of the things you're noticing are changing? Like, think maybe ways in which you're changing the way you talk, or are you saying different things to get this stuff to happen, or are you paying? Like, what are you doing?
So what are we trying to do? I think it's I don't know who said it the first. Like we treasure what we measure. So I think, I mean, one thing, if we want to focus on the effect, I think what we're trying to make it happen is to start measuring the effects of what we do and the investments that we make. So if we say that we want to be climate positive in 2040, I mean, then we have our baseline and it doesn't really look optimistic. So then what is the roadmap, and how do we invest accordingly to close that gap? And this is where we see, of course, I mean, renewable energy is incredibly important to reach that, I mean, in our production countries. But also we think that circularity can be a part of the solution to close that gap. So then to reach it, we need that into our goal setting processes, we need it to be our key indicators when we talk about what success looks like. So yeah, I think it's back to that.
Okay. What about you, Connor? Because you're sort of coming in trying to not necessarily helicopter in, but you're bringing the outside world that maybe they haven't heard of yet. Is that a tool you use to say, hey, look, your competitors are doing this, or what do you do?
I mean, it depends on which area is the right starting point for them. So it's really looking at the brand or the enabler of where is their biggest impact and where's that biggest opportunity. And you're right, there's the bit of what are our competitors doing, and that gets them in the focus of, what the consumer is looking for and how they can look at, the sexier stuff. But there's also this huge part that happens before, and there's a lot of questions that brands really probably haven't asked that much about their supply chain for a long time, or maybe really ever. So brands generally buy a finished product for a price. So there hasn't been that need to ask the question of what happens with all of that cutting waste in the supply chain. How much waste is there? Where does it go? So all that sort of stuff. So I think, yes, it's about doing the sexy stuff, but it's also just getting brands to think about, okay, we never asked our suppliers that. Or, you know, all those things, products which are returned, yeah, we just have one supplier that we've just given them to for ages, and sort of job done, it clears our warehouse. But when you actually ask them of, you know, where do those products go? There's actually value in all those products, and we can create new revenue streams for those. Or we can even create new partnerships to turn those used products, which are not resellable, into brand new ones by finding new fiber to fiber recycling partners. So I think, you know, why have we not solved circularity already is it's still a very new space. There's kind of entry points everywhere, and it's around finding the right one, the right starting point for each brand. Okay.
There are some questions coming in, which I will maybe pick up on in a second. So do send questions, everyone. There was one question was from a young designer student, so we'll answer that in a second. So hopefully this is triggering thoughts. I'd like to go upstream a bit, and Sarah, this may take you out of your comfort zone, but that's okay, right? So you were talking a bit about not necessarily the consumer facing moment, but more upstream. So the take and make stage of circular, where you're taking something either that's reused or it's virgin, hopefully, or sorry, not virgin, and then you are designing. So what does this mean to designers? You know, the producers who are listening in today, like, does this fundamentally redefine the point of a designer? Is it like new capabilities? Like, is it a different spectrum they have to now think, or like a different brief? What does it mean to the design phase?
I would say, just quickly from my point of view, I think it will release so much creativity to just get new layers of what you need to consider and use your creativity to solve. So I mean, I have colleagues working today with setting our future, circular design principles, where it's really all about the purpose of the garment. If it's something that is supposed to last for a long time, we need to design for durability. If it's something that is supposed to spin faster, we need to be able to take it apart. So then let's design for recyclability. So I think it will release a lot of creativity, and I think we will see a lot of exciting new ways of working from a design side. But I think, Connor, you have more of a personal experience of this.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're exactly right, Tom. It's how do we start? You know, it's even before the design stage and even before the production stages, there needs to be a strategy which says, designers, now we want you to start creating, you know, only with materials which come from waste or that are regenerative. And then the designers have that mandate and a focus. Okay, you know, I no longer have this huge catalog of what to pick from. It's narrowed down. But when they get narrowed down and sharpen that's where designers are really good. They have a brief, and then they can play really, really well within that space. And it's not just around, you know, getting high pattern efficiency or, you know, not blending different materials together. It's all the part that comes after that as well. You know, if you put a certain print on it, then some of the fiber to fiber recyclers will have to then reject that, depending what print it is, or if you put zips and all these things. And I think there's also that scale of, you know, a brand that makes, you know, a jumper like this with no trims on it is quite recyclable. But then you get to the other stage where you've got a high performance ski jacket, lots of different, you know, difficult to make that recyclable, because today you have to manually recycle that. So again, it goes back to, there needs to be a strategy, a mandate that comes down to the designers. They focus on how they can make those products as circular as possible in that supply chain. And thinking about, you know, and it goes back to quality as well. So we have, you know, Marks and Spencer is probably, you know, the one that's known for making really good quality products for years and years and years. And it's working out what are those quality standards, those technologist standards that you now know that if you buy a pair of trousers or a cashmere jumper, you're buying it knowing that it could genuinely be handed down to the next generation. And I think building that into the design and production phase is also important, as well as the recyclability element.
Okay. So there's a couple of questions which I think are asking for the secret to the golden chalice there. They're all going, what? Give me the answer. And I think when you talk about both of you talk about standards and frameworks and guidelines and principles, and that moment when it's if seasons will ever exist in the future, but you're thinking, right, I've got a blank mood board, I've got a blank canvas, I need to start the new collection or the new range or the new season again. In the next year, just to kind of really put you on the spot, what would you say is the thing that is probably going to be, so, you know, is there going to be a difference to that business as usual moment whereby the designer is sitting there going, right, here we go again. Is it yellow or orange or blue or peach, Connor? Or is it, oh no, actually, no, there's a new poster next to me that my head of sustainability's put up, and I've now got to do that, and I'm not going to listen to Paris Fashion Week. And is it as simple as switching to different rules, if we can call them that, or is there a secret sauce someone put? Is it about go for quality, forget about the materials, or it seems like there's a lot of options still.
Yeah, I would say I think that the strategies, the principles, and maybe also the CEO buy-in or the top management buy-in. I think it's a door opener for making that having a different approach from start. And then, like you say, once that is set and you feel comfortable with that, I think there are many options to follow. I think also, I mean, if you back out, for me, a dream scenario would also be, I think that being designer is also having some kind of a skill to create a desire. But I mean, we don't necessarily, maybe we don't need even new products to use that. I mean, what if we take products through re-commerce that are already existing and blend them with new products in campaigns? How would that be perceived? Because I still think that the designer skill of feeling what the customer wants, the answer doesn't necessarily need to be that we produce a new garment. What if the white shirts from last season would look lovely with a peach jumper? So I think I think it would be really interesting if we start to say that, hey, let's use some of our overstock, some re-commerce products, some remake products, and then we produce new products. And what would that collection look like?
Okay.
But that's a dream, yeah.
So it sounds like there's a bit of a blend of design and look, and then performance and function, and how maybe the stuff of material is getting sustainable quicker than maybe the fact that I don't really want to wear that lovely yellow top again because it was last year. So it's almost like recycling aesthetics is not as easy maybe as the actual materials being recycled. Is that a fair assumption?
I still think, I mean, it's really different maybe for different brands, like Connor said in the beginning also, but I think for us with a really wide reach, working with different customer segments, it could also be about different timing to different customers in different regions due to different weather. I mean, sometimes things doesn't sell because the weather wasn't what it should be. So I think there are so many reasons why we end up with products that are not used at the level that we would wish for. And I think then being designer, being a creative could also be finding ways to increase that usage of what we already have.
Okay. So my question for you, Connor, is, so Sarah and I are about to get into a very complex problem, I can see. Like, it's getting complex already. And we're just talking amongst ourselves. So when you're dealing with a board or a leadership group and you start talking about this and all the options and all the things you could do, and it's a wonderful thing, and come on, and then they go like a rabbit in headlights. They kind of shut down and go, I just want to make some money.
Sure.
Like, is that still one of the biggest realities of it's really hard to get your head around, or is it actually really simple? Is there like a a card you can give out to everyone today that says this is the one thing you need to do in next year?
Sure. So the way I work with brands is I come in and I'm essentially giving them, to start with, a masterclass upskilling of what the circular economy is, and really crystal sharp on what the opportunity is for them in their business, where their competitors are, where their trends are, what product type they're in, and their consumers. So it's creating that package for them so they get really laser sharp, moment at a time, on what the state of play is. Through that, it's going into deep dives of what design circular looks like, what activations look like, what the storytelling all the way looks like, what the fiber to fiber recycling is. So first of all, you're right, it is a lot to take in, but it's always starting with that onboarding, really showing them how big the opportunity is. And then from there, we do two things. We create a halo product to get the teams focused on creating something in a sprint type way. And then following up behind that, we have a foundation. And that's looking at the bigger, longer term things around what could a new business model look like? What is the innovation that's super exciting at the moment? So, I love that what you're saying, Sarah, is, those white t-shirts that were sold that the consumer has, they bought them 2 years ago. Every white t-shirt that we love and wear a lot does fade. That's natural. That's what happens. But, could H&M be say, hey, Sarah, you bought that white t-shirt 2 years ago. We know you love it, but actually send it back to us and we'll make it brilliantly white again. Or we now work with this natural dyes partner that will make it, that pink that matches that dress that you bought the other day. So I think it's making it everyone on a level playing field of knowledge, making it super tangible through one product, and then starting to build that real foundation that comes through. And that can come from any part. So going back to the supply chain, what happens with that waste? Can we create a product with that waste? What happens with the returns? What happens there? What are we doing in our flagships and how can we engage them there? So that is how we sort of work. But focusing on that halo product, it does give some focus.
Yeah.
And
it's a quick win, and it's like taking the first step up a big mountain journey, but one little step, and then just one more, and then just one more.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a couple of questions that are coming in, but so I want to ask one more, which is at the moment, and I don't want to delve into your personal finances, but we are maybe in a bit of a bubble, which is this is what we do, right? There's obviously a world out there that is, and we can maybe afford to do that because we want to, and we can. There's a world out there that's economically challenged. We're about to hit a very, very big recession again. We have a pandemic on our doorstep, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What are your thoughts about how sustainable is the energy to do this and the passion to do this, given that, and the ambition to do this, given that it's going to be tough for businesses? Like, do you think, are you optimistic, or what are your ideas for how you're going to find your own careers and jobs in this world?
Yeah, I mean, from my point of view, the innovation, so I'm always very optimistic in this space. There's two sides to circularity for me. There's what my granny says when I say circular economy. She's like, it's nothing new, Connor. You're just going back to what we did before. And she's absolutely right. She makes it digestible. It's about the cobblers. It's all that sort of stuff. I get that. Circular economy is that for the majority, making stuff last a really long time. But the difference that we have now is we have a massive global problem. But what we have to solve that is these tech innovations. So we've got digital platforms that allow re-commerce, really, really easy for the consumer to get involved. They don't have to, even with the stuff store model with Adidas, you don't even need to clean it. Someone just comes and collects it, makes it easy to sell that or to move it on. But then you also have things like infinited fiber, like genuinely now be able to take old garments and make them into fantastic new fiber, which is as good as cotton or maybe even better. So we now have those tools and innovation, which will really start to enable the circular economy at scale. It's not done manually taking off buttons and then putting it over here. It's actually scalable, and it's making high quality products again rather than downcycling it into things like insulation for your house. So I'm optimistic about the innovation that's coming through. By no means is that, the only holy grail. We need a lot of them. But I'm excited about this and the pace that these brands are releasing new business models, whether it be COS or whether it be Levi's. It's happening all the time just now. So I think that's really going to start to change consumer mindset around how they use and wear garments. But ultimately, we still have to think about where do these products end up in the end. So hopefully they get to fiber recycling, but we still see a lot exported to developing countries. So we need solutions there as well.
Okay. And Sarah, I would love you to answer that question, but I'm also going to add a question because some of the questions that come in are, this is clearly an industry-wide scalability challenge, and being in the biggest company that's trying to do this, I'd love to link that to your question, saying your thoughts on economic despair that's coming, and what are your feelings about that? And one of the questions is, I think, that's come in is, sort of what does it, as a business model, as the potentially, and maybe you can't give away too many secrets, but if migrate into this system, how does that map against the economic climate that's coming? Does that make sense? Yeah.
It makes sense, and I will do my best to answer it all. But I think also, going back to, I think the economic challenges also when we look at our customer, and of course we understand that they will also have economic challenges going forward. And I think, again, of course, re-commerce today, I think we all read those reports where we see a growing market within the re-commerce segment. I think during lockdown, it was also one of the segments that could actually continue to see a quick growth. So I would say that, from a customer perspective, re-commerce could also be a less expensive, something that's a little bit more general to still access exciting fashion. So I think that is really, optimistic. And then I think, of course, we and other big companies should in the future offer this at scale. And I think so, I think when we going into the second part of your question, that's when I will move a little bit from optimistic to realistic and say, of course, it might not be as profitable as our regular business that we have been fine-tuning for the last 70 years. There might be, a few years where we need to learn how we do this in the most profitable way. And while, monitoring also the attractiveness, gaining market share, and also make sure that we do it in a sustainable way, if that's what we claim with the solution. So I think it's more keeping the long-term perspective when you look at this shift. And yes, there might be a few years of testing, learning, making mistakes, and which could also be perceived as something else when we do a lot of pilots and we don't reach scale yet. But we really see this as a necessary first step to be able to do something at scale. We need to test and learn to collect the insights, and also, for us internally to learn to work in a new way.
Yeah.
So, optimistic that there are solutions, but realistic that there might be some drops in profitability to then take part of a growing market.
And any tips for one of the questions about reprogramming the consumer? I'd like to add to that maybe the internal employees too, and everyone in the value chain that you work with. And this isn't necessarily for you, Sarah. So both of you, what are your thoughts about now is the time to reprogram mindsets and behaviors? Do you think that's too authoritarian? Do you think now is the perfect time to do it because everyone's thinking why not? Everything else is despair. What are your thoughts? Is that a responsibility that brands have, is to say, hey, you're on our watch, you're using our product, we have to help you here? Or so in terms of reprogramming the customer, what are your thoughts on?
I think it comes down to an expectation from the customer that we need to meet. So I think yes, we don't live in a perfect situation when we look around us, but it might be a good timing to actually take that step.
Okay, that was a very, very political answer. Thank you. I've interviewed politicians. That was perfect.
Okay,
we can turn this around on Tom's side. Tom, how have your purchasing behaviors changed over the last 6 months?
I haven't. I'm just wearing pants. I haven't bought any trousers all year. No. How have my behaviors changed? Well, I'm lucky because I study fashion textiles, so I have got out the sewing machine again, and I thought, yeah, I'll start making jackets again for these events. No, I think having 3 children changes everything. I have this balancing act of knowing that they're not old enough to want to look cool every week, but there is a little bit of there's a growth challenge, right? They grow, and we have a big problem that our 3rd child is basically now gender neutral because she gets whatever she's given from her brother and her sister. So I'm very modern in that respect. So I think I don't know. I certainly have bought less this year than ever before, mainly because I haven't had to go to an office. So I think all of a sudden, I drove past the other day all these shirt stores, and they're dead because business people aren't wearing shirts like they used to. So I think there's a lot of changes in fundamental dynamics, which you could say are more sustainable behaviors in the long run. People aren't over consuming on nights out dresses and suits and professional wear. Not to say that they should get away wearing pajamas on a conference call, but yeah. So
but I also think it's exciting. Like, we all meet up today at the Teams for this kind of discussions. We didn't do that a year ago. So I think this situation has made us accelerate so many shifts when it comes to other things. In 1 month we showed that it was possible to stop flying and stop meeting each other and continue to work together. So yeah. I think that's why I actually do believe that it could be a good timing. So
yeah. Well, I have some very, very nicely wrapped linen trousers that I didn't get to wear this summer. So, I'll reuse them in spring. One question I've got, because there's a couple of questions which I think are all blending together, but there is one question around who are you jealous of? Like, who do you see out there that's maybe new, or maybe a big brand that's doing something? And Sarah, this might be tricky for you to answer, but because I know you're in love with H&M Group. But a brand that you're looking at, you're going, wow, they're really nailing it. And sorry, Norwegians, nailing it means doing a really good job. So they're really doing it. They're really speeding up. They don't care. They're willing to take a risk. They're willing to make less money. They're just going to do it. And then in maybe 3-5 years time, they'll be the ones that we all look at and say, that. Is there anyone you're seeing that's maybe small or even medium and large that you're thinking, they're
for sure
doing?
From a footwear point of view, I would say Vivo Barefoot are really close with those guys. I think they're doing amazing stuff. They're really so anyone that doesn't know them, they're making footwear which is really meant to get you close to nature as possible, make your foot work in the way it's meant to work. And those products are made to last a very long time. They're hard wearing. You can climb mountains in them, but they also have repair services, and repair services for performance products is really difficult. So they help you to make your product, use it as much as you can wherever you want in the world, but also when it's broken, they'll help you to repair it. And when you're finished with it, they also have a re-commerce model, and they've just launched a Revo, I think it's called, and it's a secondhand marketplace. So if you can't afford Vivo Barefoot firsthand, you can buy them secondhand. And they have these amazing videos showing you how they've cleaned them and refurbished them and all these amazing stuff. So that would be my one for footwear. And then Pangea. So this is bad because I'm wearing it and it sounds like I'm promoting them. But I think they're doing amazing stuff. They do fantastic storytelling around where they get their fibers from. So whether it be taking seaweed from Iceland in a sustainable way because it has antibacterial properties to it, whether it be the dyes that they use in their fabrics to make them, bright, colorful, but only using natural ingredients. I think they're in a fantastic path, and I think this jumper is 50% recycled cotton. So they're on a really good journey for using recycled materials already, but using really clean chemistry in them so that they can go on a loop continuously and maybe one day be returned to nature.
Okay, Sarah?
Yes, like you say, what could I say? I mean, I think even the example that you brought up with Patagonia, I think it's good. I mean, it might be a little bit mainstream answer to this question because they often pop up as the #1 brand we think of. But I think that's important to have those kind of brands that takes a stand and becomes really strong on creating awareness of what it could be. So I think what they have done, I mean, since day one is really important for a lot of companies today as a inspiration. But then on a personal level, I mean, I'm jealous of every second-hand player that's either you've been there doing this for 40 years and finally you see like, okay, now everybody gets it, what we've been doing. But also, I mean, the new ones popping up, becoming unicorn companies, or the new ones popping up in the physical environment and really manage to do something that is cool, trendy, profitable, good for the planet. So that's really close to my heart.
Okay, yeah, and I think the makeover of the vintage stroke re-commerce industry is fascinating. You know, we've all been there. We've all been to those student streets where you buy the secondhand stuff because you literally have no money and you're going, I'll buy that jacket and everyone looks the same. But now you go into these shops and it's you know, when Selfridges did it this summer, I just thought, wow, you know, that's not Camden Market in London.
And even last year they did a collab with Depop. So this year they've got amazing coverage. They've done, you know, that full like takeover, but you know, Selfridges have been doing little tests before these big tests, and it's really starting to change the mindset.
All right. Well, I think we've covered most of the questions coming in. I think there are definitely some people who want to follow up and have more technical conversations. So for everyone who's joined Connor and Sarah, obviously you can find them on LinkedIn. I think Connor, you live on LinkedIn, so that's not a problem. You see his tent there. So do reach out to these two. You know, I'd like to end with, I guess, a sort of a nice positive one word, maybe not one word, but if there was one thing that people should do from tomorrow morning, what would it be? If they were to wake up tomorrow going, I'm in love with this whole thing now, I can do it. What should they go off and tell their bosses or their colleagues?
I would say collaborate. I mean, you just reach out then to someone who knows what you don't know and share what you know to someone who doesn't know that, and just start to collaborate in new ways. Okay.
Connor?
I would play back. I mean, you could have prompted this one to us.
Yeah.
I would generally probably, as an individual on a personal level, I would get them to go to their wardrobe and just have a look at, you know, what have they worn, what have they not worn, and there's probably even some stuff in there that still has tags on them. So probably just really encourage people to do a bit of a self-assessment of what do they have now, and if they're considering buying something new as an individual, do they like just want it because of some marketing? Do they truly need it? And if they need it, can they buy it secondhand? And for me, it's about need and love. So if you need something, you've also got to love it for me to purchase it now. And I think that's a mindset to get people into, because so often it's the marketing. I want this. But do they really need it? And if they need it, do they really love it? And will they wear it in 10 years' time? So I'd say mindset and self-awareness.
Okay, so you've definitely read Marie Kondo's book then. Do you really love this product? Okay.